3 hours after burying my daughter, her professor called with a shaking voice. "Come to my office now. Don't tell anyone." When I pushed open her door, I heard angry voices inside. Through the crack, I saw someone I never expected. My blood ran cold. Thank you for joining me as I share the darkest chapter of my life. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from right now. I need to know who's here with me through this. I sat alone in my Birmingham study, still wearing the black suit from the funeral. Through the rain-streaked window, gray clouds hung over our Edgbaston neighborhood. My youngest daughter, Emma, had been 21, brilliant, gone in days. The doctors said sudden kidney failure, rare, unexplainable. A healthy young woman vanished in 72 hours. My wife, Rebecca, died 4 years ago. Now Emma. Our 3-bedroom house felt like a tomb. "Dad?" Victoria's voice drifted from downstairs. My eldest daughter had stayed close since Emma's death. "You need anything?" I couldn't answer. The mourners left an hour ago with their hollow words. She's at peace now. Time heals everything. Meaningless phrases. Then my mobile rang. Professor Angela Foster, Emma's literature professor at Birmingham University. She'd wept at the funeral, unable to speak as she laid a white lily on the casket. "Professor Foster?" "Mr. Patterson?" Her voice trembled badly. "I found something in Emma's belongings. You must see this immediately." My hands gripped the phone tighter. "What kind of something?" "I can't explain over the phone." She was breathing hard, panicked. "Please come to my office at the university, the Humanities Building, 4th floor, right now." I glanced toward the stairs where Victoria was tidying up. "Can't this wait until—" "No!" The word exploded. "Mr. Patterson, please don't tell anyone you're coming. Not even—" She stopped. "Not even your other daughter. This is dangerous." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my heart pounding. Dangerous? What could possibly be dangerous about Emma's belongings? But something in Professor Foster's voice made every instinct scream that this wasn't ordinary grief. Victoria appeared in the doorway. "Going somewhere, Dad?" I forced myself to smile tiredly. "Just need to drive, clear my head." "Want company?" "No, love. I need time alone. Won't be long." She hugged me gently. "Take your time. I'll be here." 20 minutes later, I pulled into Birmingham University's visitor car park. The campus looked deserted on this Saturday evening, bare trees swaying in the November wind. The Humanities Building loomed ahead, its brick facade darkening in the fading light. I climbed the stairs to the 4th floor. Professor Foster's office sat at the corridor's end. I'd visited once before when Emma declared her major in English literature. Now, approaching that door left slightly open with light spilling out, I heard voices. "I told you to leave this alone," a woman's voice hissed, low and threatening. "Give it to me right now." "Please, this isn't—" Professor Foster's voice, terrified. "I said, give it to me." I moved closer, pulse racing. Through the gap, I glimpsed Professor Foster backed against her desk, hands raised defensively. Her face was chalk white, eyes wide with terror, and standing before her, holding what looked like a small blue notebook, was Victoria. My eldest daughter, who should have been home making tea. Instead, she was here, threatening Emma's professor. I didn't think. I pushed the door wide. The hinges creaked loudly. Victoria spun around, her expression shifting from fury to forced surprise in seconds. "Dad!" Victoria's voice turned gentle instantly. "What are you doing here?" For a moment, I couldn't speak. My daughter stood there, Emma's blue notebook gripped tightly in her hand, her face arranged into perfect concern. Behind her, Professor Foster pressed against the desk, fingers trembling. "I could ask you the same," I said finally.
You told me you'd be home.
Victoria glanced at the notebook, then at me, softening her expression apologetically. "I couldn't just sit around, Dad. I needed to collect Emma's things before the university throws everything out. I didn't want her work lost." She gestured toward Professor Foster. "She's helping me gather her assignments." Professor Foster nodded too quickly, desperately. Her eyes found mine, silently screaming for help. Every instinct warned me something was terribly wrong. But Victoria's words sounded reasonable, caring. The responsible older sister, handling details I supposedly couldn't bear. "That's thoughtful," I managed. Victoria stepped toward me, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. "Let's go home, Dad. You shouldn't be driving around tonight. I'll follow you back." She turned to the professor with a warm smile. "Thank you for everything. I'll return Monday for the rest." Professor Foster nodded again, her face deathly pale. As Victoria guided me toward the door, the professor's hand moved quickly. Something small and white slipped into my coat pocket. When I turned back, our eyes met one last time. Her lips shaped a single, silent word. "Run." Outside, Victoria walked me to my car. Her sleek silver Ford sat 4 spaces away. "See you at home," she said, pulling me into a hug. "Drive safely, Dad." She drove off first. Only when her taillights vanished did I reach into my pocket. A torn piece of paper, handwriting shaky. Notebook. Her room. Under pillow. Run. My fingers trembled as I climbed into my car. The drive back to Edgbaston felt endless, my thoughts spinning wildly. Why would Professor Foster fear Victoria? What was in that notebook Victoria held so tightly? I turned onto Harborne Road. Victoria's car already sat parked in its usual spot. Through our front window, I saw her moving around the living room. I waited in the driveway for 7 long minutes. Finally, she disappeared upstairs into her bedroom. I slipped inside the house as quietly as possible. Emma's room looked frozen, untouched since her death. Her unmade bed, literature textbooks stacked on the nightstand, the half-finished essay she'd been writing for her final project. The faint scent of her jasmine perfume still clung to the air, squeezing my chest tight. But I had a task. I lifted Emma's pillow carefully. There, pressed against the mattress, lay her blue notebook, her constant companion. I opened to the first page. Week 1. Victoria gave me special supplements, said they'd help with exam stress. She's been so supportive lately. It feels nice. I turned the page, hands shaking. Week 3. Feeling sick constantly, exhausted all the time. Maybe I'm working too hard. Victoria says the supplements help, so I keep taking them. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Week 5. Something's wrong with me. I looked up my symptoms. Nothing matches. But every time I take those supplements, I feel worse. Am I imagining this? Week 7. Found the bottle when Victoria wasn't home. No label, no brand, just strange codes stamped on the plastic. I took a photo. Why would she give me something like this? A photograph was taped to the page, a small brown bottle, blank except for chemical codes. I turned to the final entry, dated 2 days before Emma died. I'm terrified. If I tell Dad, it'll destroy everything. Maybe there's an explanation. Victoria's my sister. She wouldn't hurt me, would she? The sentence ended there, unfinished. I sat on Emma's bed, the notebook heavy in my hands. The truth crashed over me like ice water. Victoria had poisoned her younger sister. Slowly, methodically, while I praised their closeness. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. Dad? Victoria's voice called. She was coming toward Emma's room. I tucked the notebook inside my jacket and moved quickly toward the window. Emma's room had a small window overlooking our back garden, and beside it, the old iron fire escape we'd installed years ago for safety. Emma used to sneak down it when she was late for class. Now it might save my life. I unlocked the window as quietly as possible, trying not to make noise. The November air hit me, cold and damp. I swung my leg over the sill just as the bedroom door banged open behind me. Dad! I didn't look back. My hands gripped the wet iron railing, my shoes slipping slightly. One foot found the first rung, then another. My heart hammered as I climbed down, the notebook pressing hard against my ribs. Above me, Victoria moved through the room. Dad, are you in here? I descended as fast as I dared. 15 feet, 10, 5. When my shoes touched wet grass, I ran. The side gate stood unlocked. I pushed through and emerged onto Harborne Road. My car sat in the driveway, but I couldn't risk going back. Victoria would spot me immediately. My hands shook as I pulled out my mobile and dialed a number I'd called hundreds of times. Philip Hughes, my assistant at the Charity Foundation, my closest friend for 12 years. He answered instantly. Andrew, is everything all right? Philip, I gasped. I need help. I'm near the house, corner of Harborne and Somerset. Can you pick me up? Philip didn't hesitate. I'm 15 minutes away. Stay there. I hid behind a neighbor's hedge and watched my house. Lights flickered on in Emma's room, then the hallway. Victoria was searching. Finally, headlights approached. Philip's blue Vauxhall pulled over and I ran to it. Drive, I said urgently. Philip pulled away smoothly, his calm presence steadying me. At 48, he'd guided me through countless foundation crises, but this was worse than anything we'd faced. Where are we going? He asked quietly. Anywhere but here. I pressed my hand against my jacket, feeling the notebook beneath. I'll explain soon. He nodded and drove toward central Birmingham. 12 minutes later, we parked at his flat downtown on Broad Street. Philip led me to his small apartment on the 9th floor where he sometimes stayed during late work nights. Sit, he said gently. Tell me everything. So I did. Professor Foster's call, finding Victoria in her office, the warning, the notebook, the entries, the photo of the unlabeled bottle. When I handed him the notebook, Philip's hands trembled as he read. His face went pale, then flushed, then pale again. My God, he whispered. Victoria did this. She killed Emma. I think so, I said, voice breaking. I know it sounds insane, but it doesn't sound insane. He closed the notebook carefully. I believe you completely. What now? Before I could answer, the television on the wall flickered to life with the evening news. Breaking news from Birmingham University, the anchor said seriously. Professor Angela Foster was found dead this evening, apparently from a fall from the 4th floor of the Humanities Building. Preliminary reports suggest a possible suicide. The screen showed police tape, flashing lights, investigators. The notebook slipped from my hands. No, no, no. Andrew, Philip gripped my shoulders firmly. This wasn't your fault. She called me, my voice cracked. She tried to help, and they killed her. She died, Philip said steadily, because she did the right thing, and we won't let it be for nothing. I lifted the notebook, grief hardening into something cold and determined. We can't go to the police. Not yet. They'll say Emma was paranoid, that I'm imagining things. Then what do we do? Philip asked. We get more evidence, I said firmly, and we make sure everyone knows what my daughter did. 3 days later, Philip laid out a plan. We sat in his flat, blinds drawn, cold tea on the table between us. My eyes felt dry but heavy. I hadn't slept more than an hour at a time since reading Emma's notebook. Philip tapped a notepad covered in his neat handwriting. "You're the founder. You have access to every office in that building, including Victoria's." I looked at him carefully. "She'll know I was there. Not if we're smart." Philip turned his laptop toward me. On the screen was a floor plan of our foundation offices on New Street, 3rd floor highlighted. Security cameras cover the hallways, but I bought a signal loop device online. It'll freeze the feed for 4 minutes, just enough time. 4 minutes, I repeated slowly. You go in, I monitor everything from the car. You find what we need and leave. I stared at the floor plan. Victoria's office, room 312. The same office where I taught her how to review donor files. What if her computer's locked? Philip showed me an app on his phone. Remote access software. If you can turn the computer on, I can bypass most security remotely. I nodded slowly. It was risky, but we had no choice. The notebook alone wasn't enough without corroboration. We needed something concrete that tied Victoria to Helen Wright, our finance director. Something proving intent. Tonight, Philip said quietly. 1 a.m, minimal security. No one on the executive floor. The drive to New Street was silent. Philip parked 3 blocks away, engine idling. I wore gloves, a dark jacket. My hands shook as I pulled the building key from my wallet. 4 minutes, Philip reminded me, eyes on his tablet. Starting now. I walked through the side entrance, took the service lift to 3. The hallway stood empty, sterile, under harsh lights. I moved quickly to room 312, slid my master key into the lock, and stepped inside. Victoria's office smelled like lavender and coffee. I sat at her desk, powered on her computer. The screen blinked to life, requesting a password. My chest tightened. I tried the obvious ones, her birthday, Rebecca's name. Nothing worked. Then, almost instinctively, I typed April to 10 to 3. Emma's birthday, April 10th, 2003. The screen unlocked immediately. A bitter, sick irony. I'm in, I whispered into the phone. Good. Look for a folder labeled private or something similar. I scanned the desktop frantically. There it was, private, locked with encryption. Found it. It's protected. Give me 12 seconds. I held the phone up to the monitor. Philip's app flashed. The folder blinked, then opened. Inside were emails, dozens of them. I clicked the most recent thread. My blood turned to ice. From Victoria Patterson to Helen Wright. Subject, blank. The problem needs handling quickly. From Helen Wright to Victoria Patterson. I can source it. Untraceable. Gradual acting. £10,000. From Victoria Patterson. Do it. Once she's gone, the foundation's mine. We split the offshore funds like we agreed. From Helen Wright. Your debts disappear. I retire comfortably. Done. I couldn't breathe properly. I took photos of every email with trembling hands. Andrew, Philip's voice cracked urgently. 50 seconds left. I closed the folder, shut down the computer, wiped the keyboard with my sleeve. I walked out, locked the door carefully, and took the stairs down, heart pounding wildly. Philip waited in the car, engine still running quietly. I climbed in and he pulled away slowly, headlights off until we reached the main road. I showed him the photos. He read them silently, jaw tight with anger. We have proof, I said hoarsely. But we need more. We need her voice. Philip looked at me, eyes hard with understanding. Then we go back tomorrow. The next afternoon, I returned openly to the office. I took a taxi from Philip's flat. My car still sat parked outside our house on Harborne Road, untouched since I'd fled days ago. I couldn't go back yet. Not while Victoria lived there. I walked into our foundation building like I had countless times before, nodded at security, took the executive lift to 3. A few staff members greeted me sympathetically. Quiet condolences. I returned them with tight nods. Thank you. Just catching up on work. No one questioned it. I was Andrew Patterson, founder. This was my building. Victoria's office stood empty. Her secretary told me she was meeting donors across town, wouldn't return until evening. Perfect. I stepped inside, closed the door softly. From my jacket pocket, I pulled the tiny recording device Philip ordered online. Wireless, voice-activated, 50-foot range. I crouched beneath Victoria's desk and pressed it into the shadowed corner where wood met metal. Invisible unless you knew it was there. Then I stood, smoothed my coat, and walked out calmly. By 4 o'clock that evening, I was back at Philip's flat. He handed me his phone, the listening app already open. It's live, he said quietly. I sat on the sofa, phone in hand, and waited. At 4:18, Victoria's voice crackled through the speaker. Helen, it's me. I froze completely. What's wrong? Helen Wright's voice sounded clipped, cautious. Dad's starting to ask questions. He went to the university the other day. Stay calm. The professor's suicide closed that door. There's no evidence left. We need to move the offshore funds faster. 2 weeks, Helen said firmly. You'll be announced as director at the gala. After that, we transfer everything and disappear quietly. Silence. Then Victoria's voice again, lower, bitter. I should have done this years ago. She was always Dad's favorite. Emma this, Emma that. Well, not anymore. I stopped breathing. Philip reached over and paused the recording carefully. Andrew, play it again, I whispered. She did. She was always Dad's favorite. Well, not anymore. I heard it clearly in her voice. Not regret, not guilt. Satisfaction. Philip turned off the app. The room fell silent except for distant traffic. We have enough, Philip said quietly. The notebook, the emails, this recording. We can go to the police now. I looked at him steadily. My hands were calm now, my voice too. No, Philip. I want the world to see it. I want her to fall publicly, not in some private interrogation room, not in some quiet plea deal behind closed doors. I stood firmly. I want her destroyed where everyone can witness it. Philip studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. The Foundation Gala, next Saturday, Hilton Birmingham Metropole. 400 guests, donors, board members, press. Exactly, I said. I paced the small flat. We'll prepare a presentation, video, audio, evidence. I'll contact our technical team. Tell them I'm giving a tribute to Emma. They won't question it. And Detective Morris? Philip asked carefully. You reach out quietly. Tell him to be there. Tell him we have something he needs to see urgently. Philip picked up his phone, already typing. 8 days to prepare. 8 days, I repeated. I walked to the window, looked out over Birmingham's skyline. Somewhere out there, Victoria sat in her office, confident, untouchable, planning her promotion. She had no idea. In 8 days, she'd stand on that stage accepting her new role. And I'd make sure the entire world saw exactly who my daughter really was. Not the victim. The killer. The ballroom at Hilton Birmingham Metropole glittered with the city's elite. Crystal chandeliers cast shifting shadows across polished marble as 300 guests mingled beneath vaulted ceilings. The air hummed with expensive perfume, champagne, and the low murmur of wealthy people making connections. This was our foundation's annual gala, where Birmingham's most influential gathered to celebrate philanthropy. Tonight's purpose was significant, officially announcing Victoria Patterson as the new executive director of Patterson Family Foundation, one of the Midland's premier charitable organizations. Backstage, Victoria adjusted her elegant navy dress. The mirror reflected a woman at her peak, polished, confident, ready to inherit her father's legacy. When the host called her name, she stepped onto the stage to warm applause. "Good evening," Victoria began, gripping the podium confidently. "To continue my father's extraordinary work is both a professional honor and a sacred family duty." She paused, letting the room absorb her words. "My late sister Emma would have been proud. She believed literature could transform lives." Her voice cracked just slightly. "This foundation is built on family values, integrity, and the dreams we pass forward." Applause swelled naturally. Cameras flashed brightly. Victoria basked in the admiration. Then the stage lights shut off completely. 4 seconds of total darkness. Confused murmurs rippled through the crowd. When the lights returned, a figure stood beside Victoria. Andrew Patterson. Gasps swept the ballroom instantly. I wore a simple black suit, my face drawn but resolute, eyes blazing with grief and fury. I looked like a father risen from mourning. "Mr. Patterson," a guest called out, "we didn't expect you tonight." "You're supposed to be grieving," someone whispered loudly. Victoria's face turned white as paper. "Dad, what are you doing here?" I approached the microphone, my voice cutting through the murmur cleanly. "I'm here to tell the truth about my daughter's death." Silence crashed over the room like a wave. From the control booth, Philip pressed a button firmly. The massive rear screen flickered on brightly. Pages from a blue notebook appeared, Emma's handwriting growing increasingly frantic. Entries described fear, confusion, mysterious supplements. Photos of unmarked bottles with chemical codes filled the screen completely. Then came the emails. White text on black background. Source: the substance. Untraceable. £10,000. Once she's gone, foundation's mine. Split offshore funds. Shocked whispers erupted immediately. Phones rose to record everything. Then the audio played clearly through speakers. The ballroom exploded into chaos instantly. Reporters surged forward urgently. Donors stood in disbelief. Board members stared at Victoria with horror. Victoria spun toward Helen Wright, seated in the second row. "You told me this was foolproof," she hissed desperately. Helen stood abruptly, defensive. "Don't you dare pin this on me. You poisoned your own sister." "You provided the substance," Victoria shot back loudly. "You wanted the money." "I wanted?" Helen thundered. "You had £70,000 in gambling debts. I only helped for my cut." The two women, dressed in elegant gowns, hurled accusations while cameras flashed like lightning. I stood still at the microphone, watching them unravel completely. When I finally spoke, my quiet voice carried everywhere. "Both of you killed my daughter. For money. For greed." Victoria turned toward me, panicked and desperate. "Dad, I can explain this. Please, this isn't what you think." "Explain to the police," I said coldly. As if rehearsed, the ballroom doors opened. Detective Ian Morris entered with 4 uniformed officers. They'd been waiting outside, listening to everything. Victoria's eyes darted wildly around the room. She bolted toward the back exit, but the crowd closed in. Hundreds of witnesses blocked every escape route. Phones raised like a wall of truth. Camera flashes blinded her completely. She stumbled badly, covering her face, but there was nowhere left to hide. Before 300 people, under Birmingham's brightest lights, everything she'd done was finally revealed. If this story has moved you, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support means everything. They arrested both Victoria and Helen that night. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. Detective Morris had everything recorded from outside the ballroom doors. Within hours, footage from the gala went viral everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Headlines exploded across news sites. Charity director's daughter accused of murder at Birmingham gala. Confession shocks city. Patterson family scandal rocks foundation world. The trial came 6 weeks later. I sat in courtroom 4 of Birmingham Crown Court. The room smelled of old wood and tension, fluorescent lights humming overhead harshly. The gallery overflowed with reporters, former colleagues, curious onlookers, and some of Emma's university friends wanting justice. Judge Howard Stevens presided, gray-haired, sharp-eyed, known for fairness without mercy. Even he seemed affected by the gravity of what Victoria and Helen had done. Both defendants sat at separate tables, gaunt, pale, their expensive clothes hanging loosely. Victoria stared forward, jaw locked tight. Helen stared at her hands, hollow and defeated. Prosecutor Monica Price rose firmly. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. The victim's notebook documents her symptoms and suspicions clearly. Emails show payment discussions for acquiring poison and splitting embezzled funds. Recorded conversations reveal their conspiracy explicitly. Most damning, we have their public confessions witnessed by Detective Morris and 300 guests." Defense attorneys argued entrapment, that grief drove me to manufacture evidence, that doubt remained. Judge Stevens responded crisply. "The confession was voluntary, obtained with police present. The evidence stands completely." Witnesses followed. Emma's flatmate testified with a trembling voice. "Emma told me Victoria was being unusually nice, bringing her supplements, checking constantly. She felt something was off. She never imagined this." Then our accountant testified about suspicious transfers. Piece by piece, the case built an unbreakable wall. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. When they returned, the forewoman announced, "On all charges of murder, conspiracy, and fraud, we find the defendants guilty." Gasps filled the courtroom loudly. Reporters scribbled frantically. Someone behind me cried softly. Judge Stevens addressed the defendants sternly. "The callousness with which you ended a young life is beyond comprehension. You poisoned a trusting young woman slowly, methodically, pretending concern while watching her die for money." He pronounced sentence. Victoria Patterson, life imprisonment without parole. Helen Wright, life imprisonment without parole. Victoria didn't move, but her hands shook violently. Helen collapsed into quiet sobs. Victoria looked at me across the courtroom. Regret or desperate hope flickered in her eyes. I looked away. Officers led both women through the side door, their footsteps echoing. 8 months later, I stood at a new office. The sign read, "Emma Patterson Memorial Scholarship Fund." Through the window hung Emma's photo, smiling beside her books, full of promise. Philip stood beside me holding folders. "First recipient interview today." We created the fund using my personal wealth, full scholarships for talented literature students with financial need. A young woman entered, nervous, determined, clutching her portfolio. She worked 2 jobs, studied at Birmingham City University, had essays that moved me deeply. "Thank you for this opportunity," she whispered. "I won't waste it." I smiled, genuinely. Make Emma proud. Later, I visited Edgbaston Cemetery. 2 graves rested beneath an oak tree, Rebecca's and Emma's. I placed roses for Rebecca, lilies for Emma. Kneeling, I whispered, She's helping others now. For the first time, I felt the beginning of peace. Justice was served. Something good was growing from darkness. Subscribe to hear more powerful true stories that teach us how to live better. Thank you for being here with me.